You spend your entire career building multi-million-dollar firewalls to keep state-level hackers and foreign syndicates out of billion-dollar networks. And the ultimate threat actor who bypassed every single security protocol is sleeping right next to you. My name is Ethan Vance. I serve as a Chief Information Security Officer in Silicon Valley. I get paid a ridiculous amount of money to sit in freezing server rooms from San Jose to Charlotte, tracing every conceivable vector a stranger could use to infiltrate a system and steal what isn't theirs. I'm good at it. I'm exceptionally good at it because I don't panic under pressure. I isolate the threat. I trace the entry point. I patch the vulnerability before the rest of the board even realizes there was a breach. Turns out, I never thought to run a zero-day vulnerability audit on my own home. People always talk about signs. They tell you to look for the subtle shifts, the quiet fractures in the foundation. A passcode suddenly changed on a personal tablet, an unannounced late-evening team dinner, a soft, secret laugh coming from the patio at midnight that you weren't invited to share. You wave them off because you trust the person sleeping on the pillow beside you. You tell yourself it's just the house settling. But houses don't settle, my friend. People do. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, the week my whole life disintegrated. We were executing a critical infrastructure overhaul for a regional commercial bank's primary data center. The kind of high-stakes, multi-week engagement that paid for the custom marble kitchen renovation Sienna had been obsessing over since early spring. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was standing in a server room that felt like the inside of a meat locker, arguing with a lead infrastructure engineer about rack spacing and thermal dissipation. My phone began vibrating aggressively in my back pocket. I almost let it go to voicemail. That's the detail that haunts me most. I almost ignored it because the incoming caller ID displayed an unrecognized local landline. Mr. Vance, this is the emergency trauma unit at Stanford Healthcare in Palo Alto. We're calling regarding your wife, Sienna Vance. She's been involved in a severe vehicular collision. I don't remember hanging up that call or stepping out of the server room. I just remember standing in the humid concrete parking garage with my heavy leather laptop bag still slung over my shoulder, dialing the airline on speaker while a calm, scripted customer service representative informed me that the next direct flight out to the West Coast wasn't for another 3 agonizing hours. 3 hours is an eternity to sit alone with your own imagination. I don't recall much of the flight itself. I remember the passenger in 4B asking if I was all right, and I remember uttering "I'm fine" in a tone so hollow it guaranteed he wouldn't ask a second time. When we touched down at SFO, I sprinted through the terminal, grabbed a rental car, and tore down Highway 101 doing 85 in a black crossover that reeked of commercial air freshener. Palo Alto at 6 in the evening is an oasis of manicured lawns, luxury electric sedans, and tech executives jogging down quiet cul-de-sacs. Normal, privileged life was humming smoothly all around me, while I moved through it like a ghost inside a vacuum, deaf to everything except the rapid mechanical thud of my own pulse. I knew every turn leading into Stanford Healthcare. I've driven Sienna to that emergency bay twice before. Once when our 4-year-old son Leo spiked a terrifying fever, and once when she sliced her hand preparing dinner. None of that familiar muscle memory prepared me for what was waiting past the sliding glass doors of the trauma center. The intake nurse at the front counter wore a laminated badge that read Denise. When I gave her Sienna's name, she typed rapidly, frowned at her monitor, and picked up a desk phone. "Someone from the care team will be right out to speak with you, sir. Please have a seat." "Someone will be right out" is a phrase that has never once heralded good news. A moment later, a junior nurse holding a medical clipboard approached me, her face locked in a strained attempt at professional composure. "Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry, sir, but you can't go back into the bay right now. Her husband and her child are already at her bedside." I stood completely still, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Waiting for my brain to process the syntax. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" "Her husband and son," she repeated gently. "They arrived with the paramedics. The attending physician is speaking with them now." "I am her husband," I said flatly, not yelling, not yet. Just issuing a system correction like fixing a typo in an audit log. The nurse blinked, looked down at her clipboard, and then her eyes flicked past my shoulder toward the reinforced glass window of Bay 4. I turned around and looked through the glass. Standing right at the foot of Sienna's bed was Brandon Ross, a senior marketing director from her firm, a guy I'd met twice at holiday mixers, and settled comfortably against his hip, with his thumb halfway in his mouth and his head resting on Brandon's shoulder like it was the most natural place in the world, was Leo, my 4-year-old boy. He wasn't scared. He wasn't confused. He was completely comfortable. My heart didn't race. It froze into absolute zero. My analytical brain instantly went to work, cataloging the anomaly. That isn't how a child holds onto a family friend. "Sir," the nurse said, her voice dropping into a cautious whisper. "The gentleman who arrived in the ambulance provided the primary emergency contact number on file. and he's registered on the digital intake form as her spouse. He rode in the ambulance. He had the emergency clearance. Of course he did. But it was what the hospital social worker handed me 20 minutes later that delivered the true, calculating blow. Among Sienna's personal effects recovered from the wreckage was a high-end luxury key fob tagged with an unlisted address for a penthouse apartment complex in downtown San Jose. I pulled out my phone, bypassed the encryption on our private family savings ledger right there in the waiting room, and cross-referenced the lease records. Brandon Ross wasn't just a coworker stepping in during a crisis. He was the co-signatory on a secret $3,000 a month hideaway, a sanctuary funded entirely by systematic transfers drawn directly from my family's joint emergency savings account. The breach hadn't just occurred. It had been operating silently inside my system for months, completely underwritten by my own capital. They discharged Sienna 4 days later with a fractured femur, a severe concussion, and a heavy fiberglass cast running from her hip to her ankle. I transformed our formal living room in Palo Alto into a temporary recovery suite. I moved my mahogany desk into the garage, set up a medical-grade hospital bed beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, and learned the precise mechanics of lifting a grown woman out of a wheelchair without causing her pain. To anyone watching through the pristine glass panels of our home, I appeared as the devoted, stoic Silicon Valley husband doing everything right. I cooked every meal, scheduled her physical therapy visits, and made Leo his daily chocolate chip pancakes shaped like clumsy dinosaurs. But beneath that flawless exterior, I wasn't just tending to a recovering patient. I was executing a cold, relentless forensic audit of my entire life. A real breach leaves digital breadcrumbs, always. Once you train your eye to look for systemic anomalies, you cannot unsee them, no matter how desperately you wish you could. The quiet discoveries accumulated like an avalanche. Sienna's personal iPhone, which had sat face up on the marble kitchen island for years, now rested face down on every surface, zero exceptions. I pulled her encrypted cloud logs and unearthed a secondary hidden calendar layer overlaid onto her work profile. Dozens of recurring blocks labeled Vidonner Sync every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, always ending at 7 p.m. like clockwork. While hunting for a spare duffel bag in the back of our master closet, my hands caught on a navy wool jacket, size large. I wear a medium. When I casually asked Sienna about it, she didn't even look up from her physical therapy ice pack. "Oh, that's an old jacket of yours from 4 years ago, Ethan." I have never owned a navy wool jacket in my life. I didn't correct her. I simply filed the lie away into the evidence directory. Then came a Thursday evening when her phone buzzed softly on the counter while she was asleep in the next room. The lock screen flashed for a single second before going dark. An obscured contact listed simply as M, followed by 4 chilling words, "Can't wait for Thursday." The lethal blow, however, didn't come from a server or a phone screen. It came from a child's innocent tongue. I was sitting on the rug in the living room, helping Leo build a wooden train track while Sienna dozed. Out of nowhere, in that flat, unfiltered tone kids use when they are too tired to censor their thoughts, Leo looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, is Uncle Brandon picking me up from preschool again tomorrow?" I froze, a piece of wooden track held suspended in my hand. "What did you say, buddy? Uncle Brandon?" Leo repeated casually, clicking 2 train cars together. "He takes me to get gelato after school on Thursdays when Mommy has her long meetings." My pulse didn't spike. It flatlined. I spent that entire night sitting on the cold concrete floor of my garage office, staring at a blank terminal screen. The next morning, while organizing Sienna's medical discharge papers for the insurance provider, my eyes snagged on a routine lab report from Stanford's intake workup. Printed on page 2 was Leo's official blood profile, O negative. My mind instinctively executed a biological truth table. I am AB positive, since I began donating blood during my undergraduate years at Stanford. It is an absolute textbook genetic impossibility for an AB-positive father to produce an O-negative child. The laws of human biology do not bend for excuses. I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I needed absolute, undeniable proof. The kind of binary certainty that leaves zero room for self-deception. That afternoon, under the guise of taking Leo to the park, I drove to a private DNA testing clinic tucked quietly away in a commercial strip in Palo Alto. I paid $400 in cash for a discreet paternity test, took the cheek swabs myself, and handed the envelope to the technician behind the counter. While waiting for the lab processing, I activated my ultimate analytical weapon. I executed a deep data reconstruction of our historical location logs from 4 years ago, working backward from Leo's January birth date. Conception had occurred in late April. I pulled up my archived corporate travel logs from that exact window. In April 4 years ago, I was in Geneva and London, leading a high-level cybersecurity task force for an international banking conglomerate. I was out of the country for 3 consecutive weeks. I wasn't even on the same continent when my son was conceived. Further cross-referencing revealed the final, horrific truth. During those exact 10 days in April, Sienna's personal device and Brandon Ross' corporate phone were pinging off the exact same cellular towers in Big Sur, California. They had spent a 10-day romantic getaway at a $5,000 a night coastal resort while I was working 18-hour days in Europe to secure our family's financial future. 6 days later, the DNA results arrived in a plain white unbranded envelope. I carried it out to the garage, sat on an overturned paint bucket, and held it in my hands for a full hour before opening it. I want you to understand the weight of that hour. That hour was the absolute last hour of my life where I still got to pretend I was Leo's father. I knew that once I broke that seal, there was no version of the future where that reality remained intact. So I sat in the dim garage light and held onto the lie for 60 minutes, letting myself feel it one last time. Then I pulled the paper out, probability of paternity, 0.0%. I didn't punch the wall, I didn't cry. What I felt was a cold, terrifying void. As if someone had reached into my chest, scooped out 4 years of memories, and left behind a hollow space shaped exactly like my little boy's laugh. The breach was total, the compromise was absolute, and the time for passive observation was officially over. There is a specific eerie kind of quiet that descends upon a room right before you burn your entire life to the ground. It doesn't feel like wild rage, nor does it feel like blinding hatred. It feels like absolute, pristine clarity. It's the icy calm of a systems engineer executing a total network shutdown on an unrecoverable server. The hot water was running over Sienna's hair, filling the master bathroom with a thick white steam. I had her head gently tipped back into the mobile shower chair I'd installed, working the lavender shampoo through her dark locks with the exact same hands that had held that 0% DNA report out in the garage just an hour prior. She was laughing softly, telling me some mindless story about her physical therapist in Palo Alto, how he kept calling her champ, as if she were a 12-year-old playing Little League. I let her finish the entire story. I let her laugh. I rinsed the foam from her hair, smoothed the water down her forehead, and waited for the exact right second. "Are you cheating on me, Sienna?" Her laugh cut off mid-breath, not gradually, not with a fade. It was as if someone had slammed an emergency stop button on an industrial machine. The only sound left in the room was the steady, mechanical hiss of the hot water beating against the porcelain tiles. "What?" Her voice wobbled, attempting a nervous, dismissive chuckle. "Ethan, what are you talking about? Just answer the question, Sienna." "No, of course not. Why on earth would you even ask me something like that?" I kept my hands moving smoothly through her damp hair, my touch steady, precise, and completely devoid of warmth, the exact same way I'd trace a malicious breach through a corrupted system log. "I checked Leo's medical file from Stanford, Sienna. I know about his blood type. I know about the O negative, and I hold a certified DNA report in my office that says my probability of paternity is 0. She went completely rigid beneath my hands. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a physical injury. The steam kept rising around us, heavy and suffocating. A dog barked somewhere down our quiet Palo Alto street, but inside our glass-walled bathroom, the world had shrunk to a sharp, razor-thin edge. "Ethan," her voice cracked, barely audible above the spray. "How long?" I asked, my voice dead level, lacking any emotional inflection. She didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched out between us, long and agonizing. "How long, Sienna?" I repeated, my fingers resting heavily against her scalp. 6 months, she whispered, her eyes brimming with sudden, heavy tears that mixed with the shower water streaming down her cheeks. We started seeing each other 6 months before I got pregnant with Leo and Brandon Ross." "It was Brandon," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "It was never supposed to become serious, Ethan. It just happened, and then it kept happening, and I didn't know how to stop it. And then I was pregnant, and I didn't know whose he was." "You knew," I said, my tone flatter than a stone slab. "You knew exactly whose he was." I reached over and turned off the shower valve. The sudden absence of water left the bathroom in a deafening, terrifying silence. The steam slowly drifted toward the high ceiling as she sat there shivering in her towel, her body shaking uncontrollably. "I wanted 2 lives, Ethan." She broke down completely, reaching out her trembling hands to grasp at my forearm, pleading with her eyes. "I know how horrible that sounds, but I wanted both. I wanted the stability with you, the house in Palo Alto, the family security, the career respect. But I wanted the thrill with Brandon. I thought I could keep them separated. I thought I could give us both what we needed." I looked down at her hands gripping my suit sleeve, feeling a profound, chilling detachment. "A mistake lasts a single night, Sienna," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs like a cold scalpel. 6 months of a covert affair before getting pregnant isn't a mistake. It's a system architecture. You built a lifestyle out of a deception. You wanted a stable husband to pay the $12 million mortgage, fund your high-end lifestyle, and handle the heavy lifting of parenthood, while you outsourced your excitement to a hidden penthouse in San Jose. You got the fantasy. I got the financial liability. We are shut down. I finished drying her off, wheeled her out to the living room bed, tucked the blanket over her fiberglass leg brace with mechanical efficiency, and stepped into my private study. 10 minutes later, I heard Sienna sobbing hysterically in the main room, her voice frantic as she dialed her phone on speaker. Desperate for a lifeline, she had called Brandon Ross, begging him to come over, pleading with him to take responsibility now that the truth was out. "Brandon, please," Sienna cried into the phone. "Ethan knows everything. He has the DNA test. He froze the accounts. You need to help me. Brandon, you promised we'd handle this together." What came back through the speaker wasn't the voice of a supportive lover. It was a cold, venomous snarl. Brandon Ross didn't offer comfort. He offered an ultimatum. "Are you out of your mind, Sienna?" Brandon hissed, his voice sharp with panicked rage. "Do not drag my name into your marriage disaster. I'm 3 weeks away from a promotion to vice president at the firm. If you bring me down with your divorce, I swear to God I will release every corporate expense receipt you submitted for our San Jose apartment. I'll make sure HR knows you embezzled marketing funds to cover our trips. I've recorded this entire phone call, Sienna. You keep my name out of your legal filings, or I will destroy what's left of your career before you even get out of that wheelchair." The line went dead with a harsh click. Sienna sat alone in the dim light of her recovery room, the phone dropping from her limp fingers. She had destroyed 13 years of a loyal marriage for a man who abandoned her the very second the consequences arrived. I stood in the doorway of my study, watching her realize in real time that her fantasy world had completely collapsed, and there was no one left to save her by 10 a.m. the following morning. The California sun was beating down on the sprawling vineyards of Napa Valley. I pulled my car up the long, winding gravel driveway of Evelyn Vance Sinclair's estate, a $4 million historic winery property that had been in Sienna's family for 3 generations. Evelyn was 71 years old, a woman of formidable poise, old-school California class, and unfailing moral clarity. For 8 years, she hadn't just been my mother-in-law. She had been a sanctuary. When my own parents passed away, Evelyn stepped into that void without hesitation, treating me with a quiet, fiercer-than-blood devotion. I walked into her sunlit kitchen carrying a heavy black leather briefcase. Evelyn was standing by her French doors, pouring fresh coffee into 2 porcelain cups, her face lighting up with that familiar, warm smile the moment she saw me. "Ethan, sweetheart," she said, setting a cup down on the rustic wooden table. "How is Sienna doing with the physical therapy? Is she resting?" I didn't drink the coffee. I set my briefcase on the table, unlatched the silver buckles, and pulled out 3 thick manila folders. I laid them out side by side on the polished oak surface with methodical precision. Folder 1. The certified DNA report showing a 0% probability of paternity. Folder 2. The forensic accounting trail detailing the joint emergency savings funds siphoned into the San Jose penthouse and Brandon Ross nonprofit cover. Folder 3. Frank Rossi's surveillance report, complete with time-stamped photographs of Sienna and Brandon in Big Sur while I was overseas in Europe 4 years ago. Evelyn watched me in silence, the smile slowly draining from her face as she sensed the icy, absolute gravity in the room. "Ethan, what is this?" she asked, her voice dropping into a cautious, trembling register. "Evelyn," I said softly, keeping my voice dead level, "I need you to look at these documents." For 20 excruciating minutes, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table and read through the evidence layer by layer. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. But as her eyes scanned the blood type discrepancies, the 0% paternity marker, and the photos of her daughter embracing another man, I watched a proud, dignified woman crumble from the inside out. Her hands began to shake so violently that the paper rattled in her grip. When she finally reached the last page, she set the folder down, pulled off her reading glasses, and buried her face in her hands. The silence in that sunlit kitchen was heavy enough to crush bones. "My God," she whispered, her voice cracking with profound, suffocating shame. "My God, Ethan, I raised her better than this. I gave her everything. How could she do this to you? How could she do this to that sweet little boy?" I sat across from her, my hands folded on the table. "I'm divorcing her, Evelyn. I am filing for complete disestablishment of paternity. I cannot stay in a marriage built on systematic fraud." Evelyn reached across the table and grabbed my hand with a grip so tight her knuckles turned white. Tears overflowed her eyes, tracing the deep lines of her face. "I don't expect you to stay, Ethan," she sobbed, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "You have been a better husband to my daughter than she ever deserved. You were a son to me when I needed one most. That doesn't change. Do you hear me? That doesn't change because of her selfishness. You are still my son." I looked at this honorable woman, feeling a sudden, sharp ache in my throat, the first crack in my emotional armor since this nightmare began. I wasn't just losing a wife. I was losing a mother who had chosen to love me. "I'm worried about Leo," I admitted quietly. "He's 4 years old. He's innocent. When the legal battle starts, Sienna's world is going to implode, and Brandon Ross has already abandoned her. I won't let Leo get caught in the radioactive fallout of her choices. Evelyn wiped her tears with a linen napkin, her frail posture suddenly straightening as an iron resolve took over her expression. The maternal instinct to protect her grandchild cut right through her grief. "He won't be caught in it," Evelyn said firmly. "I will take Leo to stay here with me at the estate during the entire court proceeding. Sienna is in no physical or emotional condition to care for a child right now, and I will not let that sweet boy witness her destruction. He will be loved, Ethan. I promise you that on my life." "Thank you, Evelyn," I whispered. "I'm not done, Ethan," she continued, her voice hardening into pure, unyielding steel. "Sienna thinks she can dismantle a family and coast on her inheritance when everything else burns down. She thinks this estate is her safety net." Evelyn stood up, walked over to her writing desk, pulled out her personal estate ledger, and opened it before me. This winery and the $4 million land trust were slated to pass entirely to Sienna upon my death, Evelyn declared, her eyes flashing with righteous anger. "Effective today, I am instructing my estate attorneys to disinherit her completely. She will not receive a single acre of this land, nor a single dollar from my accounts." She picked up a pen and looked me dead in the eye. "I am restructuring the entire inheritance into an irrevocable family trust set up exclusively for Leo's future education, healthcare, and security. And because I know Sienna's complete lack of financial integrity, I am naming you, Ethan Vance, as the sole trustee and executor of that trust until Leo turns 18. Sienna will not have access to a single penny of her family's legacy, and she will have to ask you for permission regarding any distribution for Leo's care." I sat back, stunned by the sheer magnitude of her integrity. Evelyn wasn't defending her daughter's bloodline, she was standing up for justice. "Are you sure about this, Evelyn?" I asked quietly. "She is your daughter. She is my daughter," Evelyn replied, her voice breaking slightly before settling into absolute certainty. "But you are the man who held this family together with honor. She made her choice to burn her life down. I am making mine to ensure she doesn't burn Leo's future down with it." I walked out of that Napa Valley estate 2 hours later, carrying a signed power of attorney and trust agreement. I had just said goodbye to the life I knew, but in the wreckage, I had forged an unbreakable alliance with the one person Sienna thought would always shield her from the truth. In the state of California, the legal system contains a dark, predatory loophole that catches thousands of good men off guard every single year. Under California Family Code, if you are legally married to a woman at the time she gives birth, the law automatically presumes you to be the biological father. If you do not challenge that presumption within a strict statutory window, you can be forced by a family court judge to pay mandatory child support for 18 straight years, even if certified genetic testing proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the child carries another man's blood. Sienna and her attorney banked on that exact presumption. They assumed that my deep emotional bond with Leo, combined with my sheer desire to avoid a messy public scandal in Silicon Valley, would coerce me into accepting a quiet settlement. They thought I would quietly pay child support, subsidize her lifestyle, and let her move on while I absorbed the financial and psychological wreckage of her betrayal. They forgot who they were dealing with. I don't negotiate with hostile actors who infiltrate my network. I don't pay ransom on compromised assets. I eliminate the threat and prosecute the breach to the full extent of the law. On a crisp Thursday morning, my high-stakes family law litigator, Arthur Artie Sterling, filed a dual-action lawsuit in the Santa Clara County Superior Court. Action 1. A petition for dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences in material fraud. Action 2. A formal, aggressive motion for paternity disestablishment and fraud relief under California Family Code Section 7630. We didn't just ask for a divorce. We weaponized the legal system against the real perpetrators. Artie attached the certified lab reports, the 0% genetic profile, my European travel logs, and the sworn affidavit from the private investigator detailing the Big Sur affair. Under California law, when a husband successfully proves paternity fraud prior to the court's final judgment, the judge is legally mandated to extinguish all parental rights and financial obligations of the presumed father. But it went a step further. The motion legally compelled Sienna, under penalty of perjury, to identify the true biological father on the public court record. By filing that motion, we placed Sienna in an inescapable legal corner. She either had to name Brandon Ross under oath or face felony perjury charges and potential jail time. When the court summons landed on Sienna's desk at her physical therapy clinic, the reality hit her like a sledgehammer. Her attorney called Artie within 2 hours, practically begging for a private conference to negotiate a quiet resolution. Artie's response was cold, brief, and uncompromising. "Mr. Vance is not negotiating. Mr. Vance is executing a legal restructuring. Your client will name Mr. Ross, or she will explain her fraud to a judge." Facing criminal exposure, Sienna broke. She executed the formal declaration, explicitly listing Brandon Ross as the biological father of Leo. The legal machinery moved with terrifying speed. Within 48 hours, court process servers walked directly into the corporate headquarters of Sienna's firm in San Jose during a high-level executive meeting. Standing in front of the board of directors, the senior partners, and his own peers, Brandon Ross was personally served with a court-ordered paternity establishment action and retroactive child support summons. The public exposure triggered an instantaneous, catastrophic chain reaction. The firm's executive committee didn't care about Brandon's personal morals, but they cared immensely about corporate liability, brand reputation, and financial compliance. The court documents revealed that Brandon had used corporate credit lines to fund the San Jose penthouse apartment and had leveraged company travel accounts for his affairs with Sienna. Before the market closed that afternoon, the chief executive officer called Brandon into his corner office. By 5 p.m., Brandon Ross was stripped of his corporate credentials, escorted out of the building by private security guards, and fired for gross misconduct and violation of internal ethics policies. Panicked, unemployed, and facing an impending court order mandating 18 years of hefty child support payments calculated against his former executive salary, Brandon completely unraveled. He packed his belongings into a rented moving truck in the dead of night, deleted his professional profiles, and fled California, attempting to hide out in a relative's house in Arizona. But in the United States legal system, interstate child support warrants follow you across every state line. The family court froze his personal bank accounts and placed a lien on his assets before his truck even crossed the state border. He went from a rising Silicon Valley executive to a disgraced, hunted deadbeat dad in less than a week. Meanwhile, Sienna's world was crumbling into absolute dust. With the news of her termination from her firm for corporate expense fraud, she lost her six-figure salary. Her private luxury crossover was repossessed under financial restructuring. She was formally served with a 60-day notice to vacate her boutique retail office space in Santana Row, San Jose. And when she frantically called her mother, begging to move back into the family's $4 million Napa Valley estate, Evelyn informed her cold and clear that she had been officially disinherited, and that the entire property was now locked inside an irrevocable trust managed exclusively by me. Sienna had traded 13 years of an honorable, rock-solid marriage for a fantasy, and in the end, she lost the husband, the house, the career, the inheritance, and the lover who ran away the second the bill came due. Yet, as the dust settled on the corporate fallout, I uncovered one final appalling betrayal during my audit of Leo's college fund. 3 years prior, I had set up a dedicated 529 college savings plan for Leo, depositing $50,000 annually. Because Sienna was listed as a co-custodian on the administrative paperwork, she had quiet digital access to the portfolio. While cross-referencing the transaction logs, I discovered that 8 months ago, Sienna had secretly authorized a series of emergency hardship withdrawals, totaling $150,000 out of her son's educational future. She hadn't used the money for medical emergencies or family care. She had transferred those funds directly into a high-risk, unlisted penny stock venture recommended to her by Brandon Ross, a bogus tech startup that folded 3 months later, wiping out the entire balance. She had literally stolen her own child's college fund to impress her scam artist lover. My blood turned to pure, liquid nitrogen. I didn't wait for the divorce court to settle the financial dispute. Leveraging my legal standing as the court-appointed trustee of Evelyn's family trust and co-custodian of the original account, I instructed Artie Sterling to file an immediate civil suit against Sienna for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, and misappropriation of trust assets. We obtained an emergency court injunction freezing all of Sienna's remaining personal liquid assets, including her private jewelry collection, her high-end designer wardrobe, and her personal vehicle. The judge's ruling was swift and uncompromising. Under California law, a parent who recklessly converts or misappropriates a child's custodial educational account is subject to mandatory restitution, punitive damages, and immediate asset forfeiture. 2 weeks later, an estate liquidation team arrived at our Palo Alto home. Sienna was forced to sit in her wheelchair and watch in silent, humiliating agony as appraisers cataloged her prized possessions. Her limited edition Chanel and Hermes handbags, her diamond wristwatches, her designer shoes, and her private art pieces. Everything was packed into armored vans and sold at a court-ordered public auction in San Francisco. Every single dollar raised from the auction, $168,000 in total, was directly wire transferred back into a brand new, locked trust account set up for Leo's future, with strict court orders ensuring that Sienna could never touch a single cent of it ever again. I stood on the front lawn of our Palo Alto home as the last transport vehicle drove away down the tree-lined street. Sienna sat in the driveway, surrounded by empty boxes, clutching her legal paperwork, weeping uncontrollably. She had tried to play me for a fool. She had tried to strip my wealth to fund her affair. But when you mess with a systems engineer who knows how to audit every single line of code, you don't just lose the game. You lose everything you used to play it. A little over a year after the final court decrees were stamped in Santa Clara County, I packed what was left of my life into 2 large leather suitcases and moved to Austin, Texas. I accepted a chief information security officer position at a fast-growing enterprise security firm nestled in the rolling hills of Westlake. Leaving Palo Alto wasn't an act of running away. It was an act of deliberate, necessary system purge. I needed to put 1,300 miles between myself and the glass-walled home where every marble countertop and polished floor tile echoed with the ghost of a 13-year lie. Austin welcomed me with crisp autumn air, wide-open skies, and a quiet, unpretentious rhythm that Silicon Valley had long ago lost to relentless ambition. I bought a modest, mid-century home sitting on a quiet cul-de-sac overlooking Barton Creek. There were no cameras documenting every luxury detail for social media. No high society mixers where people traded empty pleasantries, and no multi-million-dollar mortgages hanging over my head like a guillotine. For the first time in 15 years, my chest didn't feel constricted when I woke up in the morning. The constant, background hum of paranoia, the relentless, hyper-vigilant state of waiting for the next system breach, finally faded into complete silence. I had found real, unadulterated peace. I spent my evenings going for long runs through the hill country, cooking simple meals in a kitchen that belonged entirely to me, and sleeping deeply in a house that held 0 secrets. I didn't date. I wasn't bitter, but I was in no rush to open my network to another human being until I had fully restored my own core operating system. Then, on a warm Tuesday afternoon in late October, a small brown envelope arrived in my mailbox, forwarded from my old Palo Alto address. There was no return address on the front, but I instantly recognized the elegant, flowing penmanship on the label. It was from Evelyn. I carried the envelope inside, set it on my wooden dining table, and sat down before opening it. Inside was a short, handwritten note from Evelyn, explaining that she was currently living peacefully at her Napa Valley estate, raising Leo in a home filled with structure, stability, and unconditional love. Sienna, she noted briefly, was living in a small studio apartment in San Jose, working an entry-level administrative job, slowly paying off her court-ordered debts, stripped forever of the glamour she had destroyed her family to maintain. Folded neatly beneath Evelyn's letter was a piece of cheap, heavy construction paper. Slightly crumpled around the edges from its long journey across state lines, I unfolded it slowly. It was a crayon drawing. On the page were 2 stick figures standing side by side under a bright yellow sun, holding hands beside a blue river. One figure was tall, drawn in dark blue crayon with neat square shoulders. The other was small, drawn in bright green, wearing a little red baseball cap just like the one I had bought Leo for his 4th birthday. At the top of the paper, written in the large, shaky, uneven block letters of a 5-year-old child who was just learning how to spell his own name, were 7 words that hit me harder than any legal document ever could. I miss you, Daddy. Please come back. I sat alone in my quiet Austin dining room, holding that piece of construction paper in my trembling hands, and I wept. I didn't cry for Sienna, and I certainly didn't cry for the marriage I had lost. I cried for the sweet, innocent little boy whose entire world had been cracked open by the reckless choices of adults. I understood without asking that Evelyn had sent it to me quietly, ensuring that Sienna would never know it existed. I didn't pack my bags to run back. I knew that trying to step back into that boy's daily life as a legal ghost would only create confusing, painful fallout for a child who needed stability above all else. But I took that crayon drawing, folded it carefully, and slipped it into the leather compartment of my wallet. I carry it with me everywhere I go to this very day. It doesn't sit in my wallet as a symbol of regret or heartbreak. It sits there as a permanent, sacred reminder that for 4 beautiful years, I was a real father in every way that truly mattered. I didn't share his blood, but I gave him my whole heart. I made his chocolate chip dinosaur pancakes every single morning. I held his hand through high fevers, and I fought with every legal and financial weapon in my possession to shield his future from the wreckage his biological parents created. I fought for him until the very end. Looking back on the entire storm from the safety of the shore, I don't hold on to anger anymore. Anger burns hot and consumes the person holding it, and I have far too much living left to do to burn myself out over people who lacked integrity. Sienna wanted to be the woman who had everything: the devoted husband, the Palo Alto mansion, the high society status, and the secret lover in a hidden penthouse who made her feel young and reckless. She tried to construct an entire life out of the best pieces of 2 different men, completely blind to the fact that deception is a foundation built on sand. In the end, she lost every single thing she played with. She lost the husband who cherished her, the lover who ran like a coward the second the bill arrived, the career she compromised, and the family legacy she was disinherited from. And me? I walk through my today with absolute clarity, unburdened by lies, uncompromised by fraud, and completely free. You don't stand inside a burning house waiting for the person who set the fire to apologize for the smoke damage. You step out into the clean air, you clear away the debris, and you build something indestructible on solid ground. Freedom, as it turned out, was the only real revenge I ever actually needed. Thank you so much for listening to this story of cold justice, tactical boundaries, and standing your ground when everything around you collapses. If you resonated with Ethan's journey and enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming audio dramas. Drop a comment down below and let me know where in the world you are tuning in from today. I read every single one of your messages. Until next time, stay sharp, protect your legacy, keep your firewalls high, and take good care of yourselves.